This wasn't just about my home anymore. It was about taking down a criminal empire. I thought buying a mountain house would bring me peace. But then the HOA president knocked on my door, demanding the keys to my guest cottage. When I refused, she unleashed a war I never saw coming. Fines, lawsuits, even hidden cameras in my home. But she never expected me to fight back and expose the dark truth hiding behind her power. The first time I stepped onto the deck of my mountain house in Evergreen Pines, I felt like I had finally found home. It wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary. Miles away from city noise, nestled among towering pines, offered something I had been craving for years. Privacy, peace, and absolute freedom. The guest cottage at the back of my property was my personal favorite spot. Small but perfect. It was where my parents stayed when they visited from Florida. I had spent months renovating it myself, pouring every ounce of effort into making it warm and inviting. It was never meant for anyone but my family. That was why, when Eleanor Thompson, our HOA's newly elected president, showed up at my door unannounced, I already had a bad feeling. I had heard rumors about Eleanor before, how she ran the HOA like a dictatorship, issuing fines for the smallest infractions. But I never imagined she'd have a reason to come after me. When I opened the door, she stood there in a perfectly tailored blazer, a pearl necklace gleaming in the fading light. She didn't come alone. 2 stiff-looking men, HOA board members, I assumed, flanked her like bodyguards. Good evening. I greeted them, keeping my voice neutral. Is everything all right? Eleanor didn't waste time with pleasantries. I've been elected as the new HOA president, she announced sharply. We're conducting property inspections to ensure compliance with our community standards. Before I could respond, she pushed past me into my house. I followed her into my own living room, trying to shake off my shock and rising anger. Eleanor's eyes darted around the space, as if she were mentally taking inventory of everything I owned. I don't recall agreeing to an inspection, I said, keeping my voice measured. Emergency protocol, she dismissed with a wave of her hand. We've had reports of unauthorized renovations in the area. My jaw clenched. There had been no reports. I had never received any notices, no emails, nothing. This was a power move, and I knew it. Then her eyes locked onto the large windows overlooking the valley. Beyond the trees, the guest cottage stood, framed by the golden sunset. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Beautiful view. Is it your guest cottage? I hesitated before nodding. Yes, it's private. Perfect, she said, snapping open a thick binder and flipping through highlighted pages. The HOA will be using that space for our quarterly meeting starting next month. The community center is undergoing extensive renovations, and we require an alternative venue. I blinked in disbelief. Excuse me? She pulled out a document, a bylaw I had never seen before, and read aloud. The association reserves the right to utilize suitable private spaces for community functions when public facilities are unavailable. One of the board members, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses, nodded solemnly. It's standard procedure. You'll need to hand over the keys by Monday. I felt a sharp pulse of anger. That's my personal space. My family stays there. It's not a community space. Eleanor's smile tightened. I expected more community spirit from you. She handed me a folded document. Here's the formal request. You have 3 days to comply before penalties begin. And just like that, they turned and walked out. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, HOA documents spread in front of me, searching for this mysterious Bylaw 16.4. After nearly 2 hours of reading through dense legal jargon, I found it, but it wasn't what Eleanor claimed. The actual rule stated that homeowners could volunteer their spaces for community functions, with proper compensation and formal agreements. Volunteer, not be forced. I felt a surge of relief. She had lied. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it and felt my stomach drop. Violation notice. Improper fence height. $250 per day. Unauthorized bird feeder. $250 per day. Non-compliant mailbox color. $250 per day. Failure to comply with community space requirements. $250 per day. Total fines, $750 per day until all violations were remedied. My hands shook with rage as I read the list. I had never received a single violation before this. From across the street, I saw Eleanor's SUV parked in front of my neighbor James' house. Through his front window, I could see them arguing. James stormed out moments later, catching my eye as he walked toward my driveway. "She doesn't take no for an answer," he warned in a hushed voice. The Millers refused to let her use their pool for an HOA event last summer. Within a month, they were drowning in violation notices until they finally gave up and moved. A cold chill ran through me. Determined to fight back, I drove to the community center. If renovations were happening, I wanted to see them. But when I arrived, I found something strange. The parking lot was empty. The building was silent. No construction crews. No workers. No signs of renovation. I peered through the windows. Everything inside looked perfectly normal. No construction equipment. No permits posted. I took photos for evidence and drove home, suspicion growing. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Around midnight, I saw headlights sweep across my bedroom ceiling. Peering through the blinds, my breath caught. Eleanor and 2 board members were standing outside my guest cottage, taking photos in the darkness. My hands clenched into fists. I grabbed my phone and took my own pictures of them trespassing, sending them straight to Sophia. Her reply came immediately. "Don't engage. Meet me tomorrow. I'm bringing reinforcements." The next morning, I arrived at Westlake Cafe, nervous but determined. Sophia sat at the back, waiting with 3 other homeowners, James, Margaret, and Sarah, all victims of Eleanor. "We've been documenting Eleanor's actions for months," James said, "but we never had proof." Sarah, the accountant, opened her laptop. On the screen was a financial spreadsheet filled with suspicious transactions. Over $175,000 has been funneled through different HOA accounts, she explained, supposedly for renovations, but the money just disappears. Then James pulled up a listing on a vacation rental site. My stomach dropped. It was a photo of his own workshop, staged as a rustic retreat, being rented out to tourists for $129 a night. Margaret's voice shook with anger. "They're not running an HOA. They're running a rental empire, using our homes." I swallowed hard. My guest cottage was next. Sophia leaned forward. "Are you ready to fight?" I exhaled slowly, then nodded. "Let's take them down." I sat back in my chair at Westlake Cafe, staring at the laptop screen as the realization sank in. This wasn't just about my guest cottage. It wasn't even just about me. Eleanor Thompson and her HOA cronies had been running an illegal rental empire, one that involved stealing private property under the guise of HOA rules and converting them into short-term vacation rentals for profit. I felt something burn in my chest. Anger, determination, a hunger for justice. "Are you ready to fight?" Sophia asked. I clenched my fists and nodded. "Let's take them down." The next morning, Sophia and I dived deep into the financial records that Sarah, the accountant, had collected. Everything pointed to a massive fraud operation. Eleanor and her board members were shifting HOA funds into multiple accounts labeled as community improvements. But there was no trace of actual work being done. The community center renovations? Fake. Instead, the money was being funneled into payments to third-party companies, which, after some research, turned out to be owned by Eleanor's associates. But the most damning evidence? James pulled up a vacation rental website and showed me another listing. It was a photo of Margaret's shed, the very same one she had complained about. On the site, it was being advertised as a cozy garden retreat for $129 per night. "They're profiting off our properties," Margaret said, her voice shaking with rage. "And if we don't comply, they bury us in fines until we either give up or move out." I gritted my teeth. This was bigger than I ever imagined. And then it hit me. My guest cottage was next. Sophia wasted no time. "We need to act now, before they try something drastic," she said, already typing on her laptop. "If we expose them too soon, they'll cover their tracks. But if we wait too long, they might come after your property next." "What do we do?" I asked, Sophia turned to Sarah. Compile every suspicious transaction and cross-reference them with rental sites. James, document every unauthorized community space listing. We need proof that these properties are being illegally rented. Then she turned to me. You, on the other hand, need to prepare for war. I frowned. What do you mean? She exhaled. Eleanor knows you're resisting. That makes you her next target. Expect another attack soon. And Sophia was right. That night, as I pulled into my driveway, my stomach dropped. A bright orange notice was taped to my front door. Emergency HOA hearing notice. Due to ongoing noncompliance, you are summoned to an HOA board meeting to address your violations. Attendance is mandatory. Failure to comply will result in an automatic judgment against you. The fine? $15,000. My breath hitched. They were suing me. Sophia read over the lawsuit papers while I paced the room, my heart pounding. They're hitting you with a fabricated lawsuit for willful obstruction of community functions, she said, flipping through the pages. They claim you're refusing reasonable HOA requests, causing harm to the neighborhood. This is insane, I muttered. Oh, it gets better, she said, pulling out another document. They also file for an emergency injunction, meaning if they win, they can legally seize your guest cottage and use it however they want. I froze. They weren't just trying to find me. They were trying to take my property. I gripped the edge of the table. What are our chances of winning? Sophia's eyes gleamed with determination. Oh, we're not just going to win. We're going to bury them. The next day, I arrived at the HOA emergency hearing with Sophia by my side. The room was packed with homeowners, board members, and Eleanor herself, who sat at the front, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Her smug smile made my blood boil. Let's begin, she said smoothly. We are here to discuss the ongoing noncompliance of this homeowner and to determine appropriate penalties. Sophia stood up immediately. Actually, we're here to discuss the fraudulent actions of this board. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Excuse me? Eleanor's smile faltered. Sophia pulled out a thick folder and slammed it onto the table. These are financial records proving that the HOA has been illegally converting private properties into vacation rentals. These transactions show HOA funds being funneled into fraudulent businesses tied to Eleanor Thompson. Eleanor's face paled. Lies, she spat. Fabrications. Sophia smirked. Then you won't mind showing the HOA's full financial records in court, will you? A dead silence filled the room. Eleanor opened her mouth to respond, just as James stood up from the crowd. We've had enough, he said loudly. You've been running this HOA like a dictatorship, stealing our properties, finding us into submission. No more. More voices rose in agreement. Margaret, Derek, the Robertsons. The community was turning against Eleanor. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes, and I knew we had backed her into a corner. The next day, Sophia filed a counter-lawsuit against Eleanor and the HOA, citing fraud, harassment, and financial misconduct, and the court took it seriously. The judge granted us an injunction, meaning the HOA could no longer fine me or attempt to seize my property. Eleanor had to turn over all financial records for investigation. Any unauthorized rental activity would be halted immediately the moment the ruling came down. Eleanor looked like she wanted to kill me. This isn't over, she hissed as we left the courthouse. I stared her down. You're right. It's just getting started. Because now we had something she never expected. The law on our side. The courtroom doors slammed shut behind us, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope. Eleanor had thrown everything she had at me. Fines, threats, lawsuits, trespassing, and she had expected me to break. But instead, I had fought back. And now, with a court-ordered injunction, she couldn't touch me. Or at least, that's what I thought. I should have known that Eleanor Thompson wasn't done yet. We barely made it to my car before Eleanor appeared beside us, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. We need to talk, she said, her voice too smooth. Sophia immediately stepped between us, her arms crossed. No, we really don't. But Eleanor's eyes were locked onto mine. This war is pointless, she said. You think you won something? You haven't. You've only made things worse for yourself. I folded my arms. Really? Because from where I'm standing, you're the one with a fraud investigation hanging over your head. Eleanor's smug expression flickered, just for a second. Then she pulled a folded document from her purse and held it out. Sign this and we walk away. Sophia snatched it before I could react, unfolding the paper. Her eyes scanned the text, then she scoffed. This is a settlement offer. A generous one, Eleanor said smoothly. Drop your lawsuit. Retract your complaints. And in return, we forgive all your violations and let you keep your precious guest cottage. I laughed out loud. You actually think I'd agree to that? Eleanor's smile dropped. I don't think you understand, dear. This settlement is your only chance to get out of this unscathed. I stepped closer. No, Eleanor, you don't understand. You came after the wrong person. I'm not backing down. And neither is the law. Sophia ripped the document in half and dropped it at Eleanor's feet. See you in court. Eleanor's fingers twitched, her jaw tightening. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She had expected me to cave. Now she realized I wasn't going anywhere, and that terrified her. Over the next 48 hours, things moved fast. The court's demand for financial records forced Eleanor's hand. Sarah, our accountant ally, had already flagged missing funds, but now, under legal pressure, the entire HOA was forced to reveal its books. What we found was worse than we imagined. Over $200,000 was missing from the HOA's financial accounts. HOA community improvements were never actually funded. The money was being diverted elsewhere. And the worst part? Eleanor had been moving funds through shell companies, many linked to her brother-in-law's real estate firm. She's not just stealing from us, Sarah murmured as she combed through documents. She's forcing people out so she can take over their homes and rent them out. It was clear now. This wasn't just corruption. This was organized crime. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, James called me. Get home. Now, he said, his voice urgent. They're at your house. I sped down the winding mountain road, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached my property, I slammed on the brakes. 3 HOA maintenance trucks were parked in my driveway, and Eleanor was standing on my porch, watching as 2 workers tried to force open my guest cottage door. Adrenaline surged through me. I jumped out of my car and stormed toward them. What the hell do you think you're doing? I shouted. One of the workers turned, holding a crowbar. Emergency water line repair, he said casually. We have a report of a major leak affecting the neighborhood water supply. My stomach dropped. This was a setup. I turned to Eleanor. You got caught stealing money, so now you're breaking and entering? Eleanor just smiled coldly. Your guest cottage is a safety risk. We have no choice but to step in and secure it for the community's well-being. That's when I noticed something else. A small black device, hidden under the eaves of my guest cottage. A camera. They weren't just breaking in. They were planning surveillance. I yanked out my phone and started recording everything. You're trespassing on private property. I said clearly, I have a court injunction against you. If you don't leave in the next 2 minutes, I'll have you all arrested. Sophia was already on the phone with the sheriff. But then, before I could react, another car pulled up, a black SUV with tinted windows. And when the door opened, my stomach turned to ice. It wasn't just the sheriff. It was Judge Harmon herself. Judge Harmon stepped out, flanked by 2 sheriff's deputies. She took one look at the workers breaking into my guest cottage, and then turned her gaze to Eleanor. Would you like to explain yourself? She asked calmly. Eleanor went pale. This is just a misunderstanding, she stammered. We were responding to an urgent maintenance issue. The judge's eyes narrowed. Strange, because I just issued a court order preventing you from doing exactly this. One of the deputies walked up to the camera under my guest cottage's eaves and pulled it off. Looks like more than just a maintenance issue, he said, holding up the hidden surveillance device. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. James, standing beside me, muttered, She was spying on you. Judge Harmon's expression hardened. Deputy, arrest these men for trespassing. And Ms. Thompson, expect an emergency court summons within the next 24 hours. Eleanor's entire body stiffened. She had lost control, and now she knew it. The next day, Sophia and I walked into court with confidence. Eleanor, on the other hand, looked like she had aged 10 years overnight. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records proving embezzlement, rental listings for illegally occupied properties, hidden surveillance devices planted in private homes, and now, trespassing and breaking and entering on video. It took less than an hour for the judge to rule against Eleanor. She was removed from the HOA. The stolen funds, ordered to be repaid. Her entire fraudulent empire, exposed. As the courtroom erupted with murmurs, Eleanor turned toward me one last time. Her eyes were cold, deadly. "You think this is over?" she hissed. I met her gaze and smiled. "It is for you." As the sheriff led her away, I felt something I hadn't in months. Relief, victory, justice. But something in Eleanor's final words haunted me, because I knew she wasn't done yet. The gavel cracked against the judge's bench. Court adjourned. I should have felt relief. I should have celebrated the fact that Eleanor had lost. Instead, I sat frozen in my chair, her final words ringing in my ears. "You think this is over?" Eleanor had a look in her eyes. Not just anger, not just humiliation. It was something darker. Something that told me this war wasn't over yet. And I was right. Because even with her convicted of fraud, even with her stripped of power, she still had one last trick up her sleeve. And it nearly cost me everything. Over the next several weeks, the fallout from Eleanor's downfall rocked the entire community. With her and 3 board members convicted, the HOA was leaderless. And at the next emergency homeowners meeting, James stood up and nominated me to take over as HOA president. The room erupted in applause before I even had time to react. "Wait, what?" I stammered. "You're the reason we're even standing here free," Margaret said, folding her arms. "You're the only one who actually stood up to her." I looked around. Faces that had once been silent and afraid now looked at me with hope. They needed someone to clean up the mess Eleanor had left behind. And before I could say no, the vote was cast. I was elected unanimously. For the first time in years, the HOA was being run by homeowners who actually cared about the community. Fines were removed for fake violations. Eleanor's stolen money was recovered and put back into real community improvements. Transparency rules were put in place, so homeowners could see exactly where their money was going. For the first time, things were good. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't forget one thing. Eleanor was still out there, and she wasn't the type to forgive and forget. I was in my office at the newly reformed HOA headquarters when Sarah burst through the door, laptop in hand. Her face was pale, eyes wide with urgency. "You need to see this," she said breathlessly. She placed the laptop in front of me and pulled up a county-wide investigation report. My stomach dropped. Eleanor's scheme hadn't just been limited to our HOA. It had been happening across 12 different mountain communities in 3 counties. Identical scams, forced fines, fraudulent HOA takeovers, illegal short-term rentals. The same board members cycling through different communities. And at the center of it all, Eleanor and her real estate connections. Sarah clicked a tab, revealing court documents. "The district attorney's office is expanding the investigation," she said. "They're going after an entire network of corrupt HOA officials. This wasn't just a bad HOA president anymore. This was organized fraud on a massive scale. And I had been the first one to fight back. It was a victory, but also a warning. Eleanor had powerful friends, and I had just helped bring them down. That night, I was locking up the community center when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A sick feeling curled in my gut. I hesitated before answering. "Hello." Silence. Then a voice I thought I'd never have to hear again whispered, "You took everything from me. Now it's my turn." My blood turned to ice. I hung up immediately and blocked the number, but my hands were shaking. Eleanor was in prison. How the hell was she still making threats? I barely had time to process it before I noticed a black car parked across the street. Headlights off, just watching me. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. The car's engine rumbled to life. And then, just as I reached for my phone to take a picture, it sped off into the night. I stood there, my breath coming fast. Was Eleanor still pulling strings from behind bars? Or worse, was someone else picking up where she left off? The next morning, Sophia stormed into my house, laptop in hand. "I think I figured it out," she said, setting it on the table. On the screen was my property deed. "Eleanor was never after your guest cottage," she said. "At least, not just for the HOA meetings. She knew something you didn't." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" She zoomed in on an old legal dispute tied to my land. "Before you bought your house, there was a property line issue," she said. "It was resolved, except it was never officially filed with the county." A cold realization settled over me. Meaning technically, there's still an open dispute over whether the guest cottage is fully yours, or if part of it is on common HOA land. I gritted my teeth. She knew this all along. She had planned to use this loophole against me. And even now, even from behind bars, she was still trying. James and I stood outside my guest cottage that evening, the wind rustling the trees around us. "What do you think she's planning?" he asked. I exhaled slowly. "Something bad." He nodded. "Then what's our next move?" I turned to Sophia. We fight back before she even gets a chance. We spent the next few weeks. Heavy checkmark hiring a legal team to settle the property dispute permanently. Heavy checkmark installing security cameras around my home and community center. Heavy checkmark strengthening HOA rules to prevent any future takeovers. And most importantly, staying vigilant, because I knew one thing for sure. Eleanor might be down, but she wasn't out, and if she ever tried to strike again, I'd be ready.